Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Best English Podcast. I'm your host, Sophia, and today I am absolutely thrilled to have you join me today. If you're new to our channel, I want to say you that you didn't find us by accident. You're here because you want to grow, to learn, to become a better version of yourself, and you're not alone on that journey. We share meaningful educational videos every single day because we believe that a little knowledge, shared with love, can truly change lives. So, if you're ready to take that next step, to learn something new, to feel inspired, and to believe in your own potential, then stay with us. Subscribe and let's walk this path of growth together. One day at a time. If you are an English learner looking to truly improve your listening skills and learn conversational English, you are in the perfect place. Today, we are going deep into the amazing power of daily English listening practice. And I promise you, it is not just about simply hearing words. It is about really getting involved, understanding, and truly connecting with the language in a way that feels natural. Almost like talking with a friend. We are going to explore how steady, careful listening can really change your English journey, making you feel more sure of yourself and able to speak easily than you ever thought possible in everyday talks. So, please, grab a cup of your favorite tea or coffee, get comfortable, and let us start this journey to make English listening a truly fun and helpful part of your daily life. You know, for many of us, learning a new language can often feel a bit like trying to climb a very tall, maybe even scary, mountain. You start with a lot of excitement, full of energy, learning new words, carefully understanding grammar rules. And then, quite suddenly, you hit a point where you stop making progress. This is a moment where improvement seems to slow down, and the first excitement can start to fade. For many learners, this stopping point often shows up when it comes to understanding spoken English. You might find yourself quite good at reading English, maybe even writing well-organized pieces. And you might even be able to say what you think out loud a bit. But when a native speaker talks fast, or when you are trying to watch a movie without the words on the screen, it can feel like all your hard work just disappears, leaving you totally confused. I clearly remember a student of mine, let us call her Anya, who came to me one day feeling very upset. Her shoulders drooped because she felt defeated. War aswarps. Anya was very good at grammar exercises. Her essays were always well-written and smart, and she could say her ideas very clearly. Still, she told me, her voice showing sadness, that when she tried to listen, her mind would just go completely blank. She said it was like everyone was talking too fast, a confusing mix of sounds, and she just could not understand what they were saying. Anya's experience, I promise you, is very common, is it not? It is not about being smart. Instead, it is about training your ear, and more importantly, your brain, to understand English not just as a set of rules from a book, but as a living, breathing, active language. Think for a moment about how children learn their first language. They do not study grammar books or remember long lists of words. Instead, they listen. They listen closely to their parents, their brothers and sisters, the sounds around them. And slowly, without even knowing it, they naturally put together what everything means. Of course, as adults, we learn in different, more structured ways. But the main idea of being surrounded by the language, of having constant exposure, is still very powerful. What often happens, sadly, is that many learners focus too much on separate word lists or repeating grammar drills. and they do not get enough real-world English input. It is like trying to learn to swim by just reading a book about it. At some point, you simply must get into the water. And for the important skill of listening, getting into the water clearly means constant, varied, and real exposure to spoken English. Now, when I talk about daily English listening practice, I am certainly not saying you need to spend many hard hours every single day doing this. In fact, even just 15 to 20 minutes of truly focused listening can make a very big difference in how well you understand and how easily you speak. The most important word here I must stress is focused. It is not just about having English audio playing softly in the background while you are doing something else. While listening without paying full attention can help a little, especially with how words sound and the natural rhythm of the language. Real and big improvement in understanding happens when you actively listen to what you hear. This active listening means trying hard to understand the main ideas being shared, carefully picking out important words that stand out to you, and even trying to guess what might be said next in the conversation or story. This active way of listening changes it from just hearing to actually thinking and working with the language. Let me share another story that shows this time about a young man named Kenji. Kenji loved to travel a lot, and his big dream was to travel with a backpack through many English-speaking countries. He knew the basics of English, certainly enough to handle simple talks, but he really wanted to feel totally comfortable having sudden, unplanned conversations. He started listening to our podcast, and at first he found it quite hard. He would often tell me, "I catch maybe 1 out of every 3 words at best." I told him that this was a very normal and common starting point for many learners, and that he should not feel bad about it. I told him to start with small, easy steps. I suggested he pick just 1 or 2 episodes each week. Listen to each of them once to get the general idea, just to understand the main topic. And then, very importantly, listen to them again. This time, he should pause often to look up any words or phrases he did not know right away. This careful repeating, I explained, is very important. It is like carefully tracing a drawing many times until your hand naturally remembers the exact movements and shapes. For listening, your brain needs this repeated exposure to learn the sounds and their meanings until they become deeply set in your mind and feel familiar. Now, when I talk about daily English listening practice, I am certainly not saying you need to spend many hard hours every single day doing this. In fact, even just 15 to 20 minutes of truly focused listening can make a very big difference in how well you understand and how easily you speak. The most important word here I must stress is focused. It is not just about having English audio playing softly in the background while you are doing something else. While listening without paying full attention can help a little, especially with how words sound and the natural rhythm of the language. Real and big improvement in understanding happens when you actively listen to what you hear. This active listening means trying hard to understand the main ideas being shared, carefully picking out important words that stand out to you, and even trying to guess what might be said next in the conversation or story. This active way of listening changes it from just hearing to actually thinking and working with the language. Let me share another story that shows this time about a young man named Kenji. Kenji loved to travel a lot, and his big dream was to travel with a backpack through many English-speaking countries. He knew the basics of English, certainly enough to handle simple talks, but he really wanted to feel totally comfortable having sudden, unplanned conversations. He started listening to our podcast, and at first he found it quite hard. He would often tell me, "I catch maybe 1 out of every 3 words at best." I told him that this was a very normal and common starting point for many learners, and that he should not feel bad about it. I told him to start with small, easy steps. I suggested he pick just 1 or 2 episodes each week. Listen to each of them once to get the general idea, just to understand the main topic. And then, very importantly, listen to them again. This time, he should pause often to look up any words or phrases he did not know right away. This careful repeating, I explained, is very important. It is like carefully tracing a drawing many times until your hand naturally remembers the exact movements and shapes. For listening, your brain needs this repeated exposure to learn the sounds and their meanings until they become deeply set in your mind and feel familiar. Kenji's big step forward happened when he started using the written texts we provide, not just as a simple dictionary, but as a lively tool for truly active listening. His method was to listen to a short part, then carefully read the text to see exactly what he had missed or misunderstood, and then, most importantly, listen to that same part again, often doing what we call shadowing. Shadowing, for those who do not know, is when you listen to a short bit of sound and then immediately try to say it exactly as you heard it, trying to copy the speaker's pronunciation, rhythm, and how their voice goes up and down as closely as possible. This method, while it might feel a bit strange or even silly at first, is very good for making both your speaking and listening better at the same time. It teaches your mouth and your brain to work together smoothly in English. Kenji found that after only a few weeks of this dedicated practice, he was looking at the written text much less often. The sounds, which once seemed like a confusing stream, were now starting to come together into clear meanings. He was, truly, connecting the dots in his mind. One special day, Kenji sent me a message, his excitement clear even in the text. He told me how he had been sitting at a coffee shop, and he had heard a conversation between 2 people nearby. He admitted he did not understand every single word they said, but he managed to get the main idea, the general point of their talk. They were talking about a new movie, and to his great joy, he even managed to genuinely laugh at a joke they made. He wrote, "It was such a small thing, but for the very first time, I felt like I was in the conversation, not just watching it from far away. It was amazing." That strong feeling of connection, of truly being a part of the English-speaking world, is exactly what we are aiming for with this practice. It is not just about passing a test. It is about opening up many new experiences and chances that go far beyond the classroom. So, how can you truly make this focused listening practice a part of your daily life? Let us break it down into easy, practical steps. First, and most importantly, you must find things to listen to that you are truly interested in. This point, I cannot say enough, is absolutely necessary. If you are listening to something that you find boring or not interesting, your mind will naturally wander, and you will not get the full benefits of the practice. Are you very interested in the newest technology? Then find podcasts or videos, especially about tech. Do you love cooking and making food? Look for cooking shows or food-related podcasts in English. Are you a fan of exciting true crime stories? There are many true crime podcasts available. The more you truly enjoy the topic, the more you will want to understand it, And because of that, the more natural and easy the learning process will feel. For learners, I always suggest starting with materials that are made especially for people learning a language, much like this very podcast. We purposely speak at a clear, steady speed, making sure our words are easy to hear. And we carefully choose topics that are both important and interesting without being too hard or full of strange words. Once you start to feel more sure of yourself and comfortable, you can then slowly start to use real materials. That is, things made for native English speakers. This could include many different types of media, such as news reports, interesting documentaries, smart interviews, or even simple videos on topics you like. The key thing here is to slowly make it harder without making it so hard that you feel too confused. Let us imagine for a moment that you have chosen a certain podcast episode or a short video to work with. Here is a simple but very powerful 3-step method that you can use. The first step is to listen for the main idea. Start by playing the sound or video just once, without looking at a written text or using subtitles. At this first stage, do not worry about understanding every single word. The main goal here is to get the main topic, the overall message, and maybe to figure out who is speaking and how they generally feel. Are they happy, sad, talking about a problem, or explaining something? Just try to get the big picture, the main point of what is being said. This first overview helps you build a general idea in your mind, a wide outline where the smaller details can fit in easily later. For example, let us say you are listening to a casual talk about someone's recent holiday. On this first listen, you might understand that they went to a beach, really liked the local food, and maybe it rained a little. Sat. You do not need to know the exact name of the restaurant or the specific type of food they ate. Just understanding the general feeling and main activities of the trip is enough for this step. Now, let us try a quick short practice right here. I am going to tell you a very short, simple story. Your job is to listen to it just once, and then try to find the main idea, the most important message. Last weekend, my friend Emily decided to try baking sourdough bread for the very first time. She spent hours meticulously watching videos online and reading many recipes, determined to do it right. However, the first loaf she took out of the oven was a bit flat and surprisingly dense, almost like a rock. She was certainly disappointed, but also quite amused by how funny the failure was. Not giving up, she decided to try again the very next weekend, hoping to get a lighter, much softer result. She is absolutely determined to become very good at this particular cooking challenge. So, what was the main idea of that little story? You most likely understood that Emily tried to bake sourdough bread. Her first try did not go as planned, but she is firm in her decision to try again. That, my friends, is getting the main idea. You do not need to know precisely how many hours she spent or the exact scientific reason why the bread was heavy. Just understanding the main story is the goal here. The second step is to listen for details and words. This is where you get much more involved with what you are listening to. Listen to the sound again, and this time feel completely free to pause, go back, and repeat parts as many times as you need. This is your main chance to carefully pick out specific words, useful phrases, and interesting grammar structures that you might have missed the first time. If you find a word you do not know right away, pause the sound and try hard to guess its meaning from the words around it. If guessing is hard, then, and only then, should you look it up. It is also a very good habit to write down new words or phrases that seem especially important or useful to you, either in a special notebook or on your phone. Remember, the goal is not to write down everything, but to catch the most important and useful language parts. This stage is also a great time to use the practice of shadowing. As I mentioned earlier with Kenji, shadowing means listening to a short part of the sound and then immediately trying to say it exactly as you heard it, trying to copy the speaker's pronunciation, rhythm, and how their voice goes up and down as closely as possible. This method, while it might feel a bit strange or even silly at first, is very good for making both your speaking and listening better at the same time. It teaches your mouth and your brain to work together smoothly in English. Let us go back to Emily's bread baking story again. I will repeat the story, and this time try to pick out a few important words or phrases, and maybe even try a little shadowing if you feel brave. Last weekend, my friend Emily decided to try baking sourdough bread for the first time. She spent hours watching videos and reading recipes. The first loaf came out a bit flat and very dense, almost like a rock. She was disappointed but also quite amused. She decided to try again next weekend, hoping for a lighter, fluffier result. She's determined to master it. Did you manage to catch words and phrases like sourdough bread, hours watching videos, flat and very dense, disappointed but also quite amused, try again, lighter, fluffier, and determined to master it? These are exactly the kinds of specific details that add richness and depth to how well you understand the story. You might also have clearly noticed the small but important difference between flat and dense and the desired lighter, fluffier outcome. Understanding these contrasting ideas helps you follow the story better and understand everything that is happening. The third and final step is to listen for connection and reflection. This part is often sadly overlooked, but it is very important for deep learning. Listen to the sound one more time, but this time your focus should be on trying to connect what you are hearing to your own personal experiences, what you already know, or even your own thoughts and feelings. How does this story or piece of information relate to something you have done in your own life, something you have seen, or something you have thought deeply about? Can you clearly summarize the main points in your own words, either by saying them out loud or by thinking them silently in your mind? Can you guess what might happen next in the story, or what kind of advice you might give to the speaker if you were talking to them? This is the point where real understanding and making the language your own truly begin to happen. You are no longer just quietly taking in information. You are actively working with it, making it a part of yourself. Continuing with Emily's story, for example, you might find yourself thinking, "Oh, I clearly remember when I tried to make pancakes for the very first time, and they all ended up completely burned." It is very frustrating when things do not go as planned, but it is true that you genuinely learn so much from your mistakes. Or perhaps you might wonder, I wonder what specific recipe she used. Maybe she needs to try a different kind of flour to get that lighter, softer texture. This kind of thoughtful thinking, where you connect to your own life and think deeply about the content, makes you much more involved with what you are listening to and makes the learning truly stick. It changes the language from being just a school subject into a practical and powerful tool for real-world connection and understanding. Let me now tell you another real-life story that strongly shows the great effect of continuing to listen. This is the story of a man named David who made the big move from Germany to Ireland for a new job. David's English was good enough for his work, which mostly involved a lot of technical talks and formal exchanges. However, he found it very hard to keep up with the casual, often fast conversations of his Irish coworkers outside of work hours. He frequently felt left out during social gatherings because he simply could not understand the lively jokes and the common local slang. He told me once, with a shy smile, "I understood every single word in the meeting, but then when we went to the pub afterwards, it was as if they were speaking a completely different language." This, I must tell you, is a common problem for many English learners. You have the basic grammar and a good number of words, but real-life spontaneous speech often includes many idioms, common sayings, and faster, smoother rhythms that are rarely found neatly listed in textbooks. David, being a determined person, decided to face this problem directly. He started a strict routine of listening to Irish radio shows and podcasts, especially about Irish culture and history, even though he found them very hard and often confusing at first. He openly admitted that he did not understand most of what was being said, but he made a strong promise to listen for at least 30 minutes every single evening, without fail. What David did differently, and what I strongly suggest you do in your own practice, is a method I call guessing from context. Instead of stopping the audio to slowly look up every single word he did not know, he would consciously try to figure out the meaning from the words around it, the speaker's tone of voice, and the general situation of the conversation. For example, if he heard someone say, "He was absolutely wrecked after that long day," David might not have known the exact meaning of wrecked, but if he understood the phrase "long day" and the speaker's tone sounded tired, he could correctly guess that wrecked meant totally exhausted or worn out. This ability to guess meaning from context is a skill that definitely needs practice, but it is very important for listening in real time, because in a live conversation, you simply do not have the luxury of pausing to use a dictionary. After about 6 months of this dedicated and steady listening, David noticed a truly remarkable and big change in his understanding. He was no longer just understanding the main points of talks at the pub. He was now catching the subtle jokes, understanding the tricky meanings of their words. And he even started to naturally use some of the common Irish sayings himself. One evening, he told me with a huge, happy smile, "Someone used the phrase, 'The creck was mighty today,' and I did not just understand it, I knew exactly what they meant about the fun we had. A year ago, I would have just stared blankly, completely lost. This, my friends, is the true beauty and power of steady, active listening. It is not just about understanding individual words, but about truly understanding culture, humor, and the deep human connection that language allows. So, how do we make sure this becomes a daily habit that you can keep up with? Something that you actually look forward to instead of dreading? It is all about fitting it smoothly into your daily routine, finding those natural small amounts of time that you already have. Think for a moment about those times in your day when you might otherwise not be doing much or just doing regular chores. Are you traveling to work or school each day? That is, without a doubt, a perfect time for focused listening. Instead of just scrolling through social media, why not put on an interesting English podcast? Are you exercising, maybe at the gym or going for a run? Listen to a speech that inspires you in English or an interesting interview with an athlete you admire. Are you doing chores around the house? Perhaps washing dishes, making a meal, or tidying up. Put on an English audio story, a captivating documentary, or even an interesting lecture. Even short moments spent waiting in line at the grocery store or during a quick break at work can be turned into valuable chances for a quick 5-minute listening exercise. The main key is to make it a natural and fun part of your day, something you want to do rather than something you feel you have to do. Another very effective method for learners is to get involved with storytelling. People, by their very nature, are made to love stories. We tend to remember information much better and more clearly when it is told as a story. That is exactly why, on this podcast, we often use stories to show different points and to make the learning experience more relatable and easier to remember. When you listen to a story, your brain is actively trying to follow the plot, understand what the characters want, and guess what might happen next. This natural involvement directly helps and strengthens your listening skills in a very natural way. Allow me to tell you a story now about a charming old lady named Mrs. Higgins and her rather unusual pet, a bright parrot named Captain Squawk. This is not a real-life story in the sense that it actually happened, but it is carefully made to feel real, to bring out real feelings, and to give you many natural English expressions. Listen carefully, and try your best to follow the story as it unfolds. Mrs. Higgins lived in a truly lovely, though perhaps a little too small, cottage located right at the edge of the quiet village. Her days were a comforting routine of knitting complex patterns, carefully looking after her growing garden, and enjoying the constant, often quite loud, company of Captain Squawk. Now, Captain Squawk was certainly not your average, quiet little bird that just chirped nicely. Oh no, not at all. He was a grand, bright, emerald green parrot with a personality as lively and colorful as his own feathers. He had belonged to Mrs. Higgins's late brother, who had been a retired sea captain. And from him, Captain Squawk had gained not only his rather important name, but also a surprisingly large, though sometimes rude, vocabulary. One wonderfully sunny Tuesday morning, Mrs. Higgins was busy working in her garden, meticulously looking after her prize-winning roses, which were known throughout the village for their beautiful flowers. Captain Squawk was sitting comfortably on her shoulder, muttering softly to himself. A low, rumbling sound of pirate phrases and small parts of old sea songs. Suddenly, a sharp new sound cut through the peaceful morning air. A desperate, high-pitched crying sound, clearly coming from somewhere behind the thick, overgrown hedge that marked her property. Mrs. Higgins, with a gentle frown on her face, carefully looked through the thick leaves. There, sadly tangled in some thorny branches, was a tiny, shaking kitten, no bigger than her hand, its fur messy and wet from what looked like recent rain. "Oh, you poor dear," she said softly, her voice full of real care and kindness. She then carefully, with much effort, worked to free the frightened creature from the thorny trap. Captain Squawk, however, reacted quite differently to finding it. "Shiver me timbers! A landlubber!" he squawked loudly, puffing out his chest feathers proudly. "Avast ye, scurvy beast!" His loud, strong calls, though surely meant to sound threatening and powerful, actually made the tiny kitten even more scared, causing it to struggle harder against the thorns. Mrs. Higgins sighed, a familiar, loving annoyance on her face. "Captain, please, you are not helping at all," she gently scolded. She finally managed to free the kitten, holding it gently and safely in her hands. It was shaking uncontrollably, clearly cold and very hungry. She brought the tiny creature inside her cozy cottage, wrapped it snugly in a soft, warm blanket, and then offered it a small dish of milk. Captain Squawk watched everything happen with a very sharp eye. He hopped gracefully off Mrs. Higgins's shoulder and then walked purposefully closer to the kitten, tilting his head to one side with a very curious look. "Ahoy there, little matey! Lost your ship, have ye?" he chirped. The kitten, to Mrs. Higgins's surprise, stopped shaking for a moment and looked up at the big, talking bird with wide, innocent, and curious eyes. Over the next few days, the kitten, whom Mrs. Higgins lovingly named Pip because of his tiny, constant squeaks, slowly but surely started to get his strength and energy back. He was still a little careful around Captain Squawk's loud statements and sudden outbursts, but he seemed to naturally understand that the parrot's intentions were, in their own strange way, truly good. Captain Squawk, for his part, seemed to have grown very fond of the tiny cat. He would often be seen dropping small pieces of his favorite dried fruit near Pip's sleeping spot, occasionally adding a loud shout of, "Eat up, me hearty." One wonderfully sunny afternoon, a very important visitor arrived at Mrs. Higgins' lovely cottage. The mayor himself, Mr. Henderson, a rather proud man who was rarely seen smiling, his usual manner being serious and unbending. He had come to talk about the detailed plans for the upcoming village flower show, and Mrs. Higgins's magnificent roses were, as always, expected to be a main attraction, a source of great pride for the community. As they sat comfortably in the living room, having a rather formal discussion about prize categories and judging rules, Pip, now much stronger and much more playful, decided this was a good time for a big adventure. He quietly climbed onto the armchair where Mr. Henderson was sitting, completely unseen by the busy mayor, who was deeply focused on the conversation. Captain Squawk, who was sitting calmly on his usual stand, noticed Pip's playful look, just as Mr. Henderson was proudly saying, "And I believe, Mrs. Higgins, your Crimson Glory will surely win first prize, as always, for its wonderful bloom and unmatched beauty." Pip, having reached the very top of the armchair, decided to make a sudden, unannounced jump directly onto Mr. Henderson's lap. Mr. Henderson, completely surprised by the sudden furry thing that landed on him, let out a rather undignified yell and quickly jumped to his feet, sending his teacup clattering loudly to the shiny floor. "Good heavens! What on earth was that?" he shouted, his face clearly pale with shock and anger. Captain Squawk, seeing the sudden mess he had accidentally helped cause, puffed himself up as much as he could. "Land ho! Abandon ship! The Kraken attacks!" he shouted loudly, his voice echoing strongly through the small cottage. Mrs. Higgins, feeling very embarrassed, rushed forward to apologize a lot, gently picking up a very confused Pip. "Oh, Mr. Henderson, I am so very, very sorry. This is Pip, my new kitten, and that's Captain Squawk. They usually behave much, much better, I promise you." Mr. Henderson, trying hard to calm himself down, carefully straightened his tie. His expression slowly changed from shock to something like confused curiosity. "A kitten, you say? And a talking bird?" He looked closely at Captain Squawk, who was now preening himself, clearly proud of his dramatic outburst. A talking bird he is," chirped Captain Squawk, suddenly speaking in a surprisingly polite and charming way. "And a fine lady, Mrs. Higgins. She saved the little creature. She has a true sailor's heart." Mr. Henderson, to Mrs. Higgins's great surprise, let out a small, real laugh. The sheer absurdity of the whole situation along with Captain Squawk's unexpected clear speaking and charming interruption, seemed to completely break through his usually serious manner. "Well, Mrs. Higgins," he said, a real smile finally appearing on his face, "it seems you have quite a lively home indeed. Perhaps we should think about a special award for most adventurous pet in the upcoming flower show." Mrs. Higgins smiled warmly, a comforting feeling spreading through her. She realized then that sometimes the most unexpected friends, even a loud parrot and a playful kitten, can bring great joy and have the amazing ability to break down barriers, turning even a strict and formal mayor into a laughing, truly human person. And Captain Squawk, always looking for a chance, quickly added, "And a double portion of crackers for the captain. Wouldn't you agree, my friends?" This kind of story, as you can see, is not only wonderfully entertaining, but also full of very useful words and many natural expressions. Think for a moment about the phrases you heard in the story. Tending to her prize-winning roses, meaning taking care of them. Muttering to himself, meaning speaking quietly and unclear. A desperate, high-pitched mewling, clearly describing the sound of a scared kitten. Matted and damp, painting a clear picture of the kitten's condition. Cooed, meaning a soft, gentle sound of love. Painstakingly worked to free, meaning working very carefully and hard. Puffed out his chest, showing pride or bravery. A vasty, scurvy beast, a classic pirate shout. Fond exasperation, meaning a mix of love and annoyance. Cradling it gently, meaning holding it softly. Hopped off for a bird's movement. Strutted closer, meaning walking proudly. Eagle eye, meaning watching very closely. Took a liking to, meaning started to like. Insistent squeaks for constant small sounds. Boisterous pronouncements for loud, energetic statements. Pompous man, meaning someone who acts too important. Mischievous glint for a playful, naughty look. Preoccupied mayor, meaning a distracted mayor. Dramatic leap for a sudden, big jump. Furry projectile, a funny way to describe the kitten. Yelled and jumped up for a sudden, loud reaction. Clattering to the floor for a noisy fall. Good heavens, what on earth was that? A common shout of surprise. Bellowed for a very loud shout. Regain his composure, meaning to calm down and become collected again. Stern facade for a serious outside appearance. Lively household for a busy and energetic home. Boisterous parrot and mischievous kitten describing their personalities. Double ration of crackers for an extra treat. And me hearties, a friendly pirate way to address people. Even if you did not understand every single one of these expressions right away, the rich context of the story surely helped you understand what they meant. For instance, mewling sounds like a cat, so you can guess it is the sound a kitten makes. The description of Mr. Henderson as a pompous man sounds negative, and the detail that he rarely smiled further confirms that idea. This, my friends, is active listening working. You are actively using clues from the story, the speaker's tone, and even what the characters do to figure out the meaning, which is a much better and more interesting way than just remembering lists of words. Now, let us talk about how important it is to have variety in your English listening practice. While podcasts like ours are certainly great tools, I strongly suggest you do not only listen to them. Hearing different accents, different speeds of speaking, and a wide range of topics is very important for making your listening skills strong and flexible, especially for conversational English. Think about adding these different types of listening materials to your daily routine. First, Interviews are excellent for understanding how conversations naturally flow, seeing how questions are asked and answered, and hearing different ideas and views. You can easily find interviews on places like YouTube with famous people you admire or experts in areas you are interested in. Second, documentaries offer many words related to specific subjects, whether it is history, science, nature, or art, and they often have clear, well-spoken narration. Many popular streaming services have a large variety of documentaries available in English, covering countless interesting topics. Third, if you like reading, then trying an audiobook can be a wonderful and immersive experience. A good plan is to start with a book you have already read in your own language, or you can choose a simpler version made for English learners. This helps you focus closely on the sounds and rhythms of the English language without the extra pressure of trying to understand a completely new story at the same time. Fourth, listening to news reports in English, particularly from well-known and trusted sources, is a great way to learn words about current events and to get used to more formal ways of speaking. Try to find news sources that offer both sound and written versions, which will let you check what you understand effectively. Finally, besides podcasts made especially for learning a language, explore conversational podcasts where people are simply talking about everyday topics, just like they would in real life. These are like hidden treasures for natural, informal English, including idioms, slang, and common phrases. You might feel a bit lost or overwhelmed at first, but with steady listening, your brain will slowly start to recognize patterns and understand the fast back-and-forth talks. Allow me to give you a strong example of how varied listening practice greatly helped another one of my dedicated students, Sarah. Sarah was carefully getting ready for a very important job interview with a big international company. Her written English was by all accounts excellent, but she had a deep fear about the listening part of the interview, particularly her ability to understand different accents. She had mostly practiced with American English, but she knew that the company had employees from all over the world, meaning she could hear many different accents. I strongly encouraged Sarah to create a personal listening plan that purposely included a mix of accents. She began by regularly listening to BBC podcasts for British English, CBC podcasts for Canadian English, and ABC podcasts for Australian English. It was certainly hard, she told me later, especially during the first few weeks. Sometimes, she recounted with a laugh, it felt like my brain was literally tying itself in knots trying to figure everything out. But with admirable determination, she firmly stuck to her routine. One particular practice that Sarah found to be very helpful was listening to short news clips from various regions and then trying to summarize them in her own words, first silently in her head, and then by saying them out loud. For example, she would listen to a 2-minute news report about the world economy, and then she would try to explain what she had heard to an imaginary friend. This exercise made her actively process the information and then speak it out, which is a higher-level listening skill. It is not just about understanding. It is about understanding and then being able to produce the language based on that understanding. During her actual job interview, Sarah faced a group of interviewers, one of whom spoke with a very strong Scottish accent. She told me later that in the past, she would have completely panicked and likely frozen. But because she had carefully trained her ear with many different accents, she felt only a small shock, but quickly adjusted her listening focus. She was able to understand the questions asked and answer confidently and clearly. To her great joy, she got the job. Her success was not only about learning more words, it was mainly about building listening strength, the very valuable ability to quickly and effectively adjust to different ways of speaking and talking situations. So, how can you start to build your own listening strength? Here is a small exercise you can try right now. I am going to tell you a short, everyday story, first at a slightly faster, more natural speed, and then I will break it down for you, explaining some of the natural expressions used. Listen for the main idea first, without worrying about every single word. You know, yesterday I had this hilarious experience at the grocery store. I was looking for a specific brand of olive oil, and I just couldn't find it anywhere. I must have walked up and down the aisles 3 times, feeling more and more frustrated. Finally, I decided to ask a store assistant. He looked at my phone, where I had a picture of the bottle, and just chuckled. He pointed right behind me to a display I'd completely missed. I felt a bit silly, but we both had a good laugh about it. Sometimes the answer's right under your nose. Did you manage to get the main idea? Waers, someone was searching for olive oil, could not find it, and it turned out to be clearly placed right behind them the whole time. Now, let us break down that story, focusing specifically on some of the more human-like expressions and how we use them naturally in everyday talk. When I started, I said, "You know, yesterday I had this hilarious experience at the grocery store." Here, "you know" is a very common phrase used in conversation that makes speech sound more natural and informal, almost as if you are sharing a story with a close friend. A hilarious experience simply means a very, very funny one. Then, I mentioned, I was looking for a specific brand of olive oil, and I just couldn't find it anywhere. The phrase, "couldn't find it anywhere," is a very common and natural way to say that it was hard or impossible to find something, showing that the search was thorough. I continued, "I must have walked up and down the aisles 3 times, feeling more and more frustrated." To walk up and down the aisles clearly describes the repeated, often useless searching movement inside a store. The phrase, "more and more frustrated," clearly shows a growing emotional state, meaning increasing annoyance or irritation. Then, finally, I decided to ask a store assistant. He looked at my phone, where I had a picture of the bottle, and just chuckled. A store assistant is the usual and widely understood term for someone who works in a shop and helps customers. When someone chuckled, it means they laughed quietly, often to themselves, perhaps because they found something amusing or a little unbelievable. And finally, he pointed right behind me, to a display I'd completely missed. I felt a bit silly, but we both had a good laugh about it. Sometimes the answer is right under your nose. To have completely missed something means you did not see it at all, even though it was there. To feel a bit silly is a natural and quiet way to say you felt a little foolish or embarrassed about a small mistake. When you had a good laugh about it, it means both people found the situation truly funny and shared a moment of humor. And the saying, "right under your nose," is a great and very common expression, meaning that something is very clear and easy to see, yet you somehow did not notice it. This kind of detailed breakdown, where you carefully look at not just the individual words, but also the common phrases, their small differences in meaning, and how they are used naturally in a situation, is very helpful for people learning conversational English. It actively helps you to move beyond just translating word for word and to truly understand the deeper meanings and subtle points of spoken English, allowing you to understand not just what is said, but how it is said and what it suggests. Remember, the main goal of daily listening practice is not to be perfect right away, but to keep getting better and better over time. There will definitely be days when you feel a great burst of progress, as if everything is making sense easily. And then there will be other days when it feels like you are not moving forward at all, maybe even going backward. This up and down, I assure you, is completely normal and a natural part of any learning process. The most important part, the foundation of successful language learning, is to keep going steadily and, perhaps even more importantly, to be kind and patient with yourself throughout your journey. Celebrate every small win along the way, and do not let yourself get discouraged by problems or temporary setbacks. Let us now include another real-life situation, a slightly longer one this time, to give you plenty of chances to practice your listening skills in a story. This story is about overcoming a deep fear, and it skillfully uses a range of feelings and common, relatable expressions that are key for speaking English easily. My cousin, Leo, had always been an absolutely fantastic cook, the kind of person who seemed to have a magical ability to make a fancy meal from what looked like just a few simple things. His deep love for food was truly catching. Anyone who spent time with him quickly caught his excitement, and his kitchen was always busy with the most delicious and inviting smells. However, even with his great cooking skills, there was one thing that totally scared him: speaking in front of people. He could happily and easily chat with a small group of friends about complicated recipes for hours. But the simple thought of standing in front of more than 5 people and having to talk sent uncontrollable shivers down his back. His hands would always get sweaty, his voice would start to shake without him wanting it to, and his mind, annoyingly, would go completely blank, leaving him unable to speak and flustered. One day, a special chance came up, one that was both exciting and totally scary for Leo. The local community center announced they were holding a culinary showcase, an event where amateur chefs from the area could proudly show off their best dishes and, very importantly, talk about their personal cooking journey. It was, without a doubt, a great opportunity for Leo to share his deep love for cooking, to get the recognition he truly deserved for his amazing talent, and maybe even to find new customers for his small, growing catering business. His wife, Maria, who was always his biggest supporter and constant source of encouragement, eagerly pushed him to sign up. "Leo," she said with strong belief, "this is truly your moment. Just imagine sharing your absolutely amazing duck confit with everyone in the community." Leo, however, found himself starting to sweat coldly just thinking about the event. "Maria," he stammered, his voice filled with worry. "You know very well how I get. My tongue feels like sandpaper, and my knees literally knocked together. What if I completely forget everything I plan to say? What if I make a complete fool of myself in front of everyone?" Maria, being the very practical and endlessly encouraging person that she was, quickly suggested a smart plan. "Look, my dear," she began, her voice calm and comforting. "You are very good at cooking. What if we focus hard on practicing your talk about cooking? We can do it every single day, just for 10 minutes. You can talk to me, you can talk to your reflection in the mirror, you can even talk to the cat if you want." Leo, though very doubtful about how well such a simple idea would work, reluctantly agreed to try. So, every single morning, after he had finished his first cup of coffee, he would faithfully stand in front of the bathroom mirror and tried to describe his careful process for making his famous apple pie. At first, the experience was very hard and painful. He would awkwardly trip over his words, completely forget important ways to connect his ideas, and blush very red at his own reflection, feeling very self-conscious. Captain, their grumpy old cat, would often just sit there, staring at him with a look of deep disapproval, occasionally flicking his tail in what seemed like a sign of not caring. Maria, meanwhile, faithfully acted as his attentive audience, giving gentle corrections and a steady stream of warm encouragement. "That was really great, Leo," she would say. "Just try to slow down a little bit on that last part. You were speaking a bit fast. Or maybe you could add a personal story there, Leo, about how you first learned to bake that particular pie. It would make it more interesting." As the weeks slowly but steadily passed, a small but important change began to happen. Leo's voice, though still a little unsure, started to get noticeably stronger and more confident. He found himself thinking more deeply about his chosen topic. Whether it was apple pie, duck confit, or whatever delicious food he was describing, and the words, to his surprise, started to come out more naturally and easily from his mouth. He slowly found that by talking passionately about something he truly loved, the huge fears seemed to get smaller, just a little bit each day, becoming easier to handle. He started trying different ways to explain complicated cooking steps, using more descriptive words and interesting comparisons to make his explanations clearer and more appealing. On the much-awaited day of the culinary showcase, Leo was, understandably, still very nervous. His heart was beating very fast, like a drum against his ribs, a constant rhythm of worry. But as he walked onto the small, brightly lit stage, saw the eager and waiting faces in the audience, and took a deep, calming breath, something truly amazing clicked inside him. He began to speak, not about his fear, but about how crisp the apples were, the comforting warmth of the cinnamon, and the pure joy of sharing delicious food with others. He completely forgot to stammer. He forgot to blush. He even managed to tell a few sudden jokes that, to his surprise, landed remarkably well with the audience, making them laugh genuinely. When he finally finished his presentation, the applause that burst out was deafening, a very loud sign of his success. People immediately rushed to his table, eager to try his excellent dishes and to ask him many questions about his cooking methods. He realized then, with a very clear understanding, that all those small, steady daily practices, even the seemingly silly act of talking to a doubtful cat, had together built up not only his speaking skills, but more importantly, his self-confidence. He had not magically become an experienced public speaker overnight, but he had taken that very important first step, and the fear, while perhaps not completely gone, had certainly lost its strong power over him. It was a strong proof of the old idea that steady effort, even if it seems small, can indeed lead to big and truly life-changing personal growth. This story about Leo, as you can see, serves as a wonderful and inspiring example of several very important points for all English learners who want to speak English easily in conversations. First, it highlights a very important truth. Even native speakers can struggle a lot with certain communication skills, like speaking in public. It is not always just about a language barrier. Sometimes it is mainly about not feeling confident. So, if you ever feel nervous or worried about speaking English, please remember that everyone, no matter what their first language is, feels some level of worry or fear at times. This shared human experience makes Leo's journey easy to relate to and very human. Second, take note of the rich words and natural ways of speaking that are carefully woven throughout the story, making it very vivid and interesting for the listener. We heard phrases like culinary prowess, which means great skill in cooking, and the ability to whip up a gourmet meal, which means to make a fancy, high-quality meal very quickly and easily. We learned that his passion for food was infectious, meaning his excitement for cooking spread easily to others. His kitchen was always buzzing with delicious aromas, paints a picture of a busy, good-smelling, and inviting place. The thought of speaking in public sent shivers down his spine, a common way to say you are very scared or nervous. His hands would always get clammy, meaning they would become sweaty. His voice would tremble, and his mind would go completely blank, meaning he could not think of anything at all. These are all natural, human-like expressions that greatly improve the story and make it feel real. When Maria, his supportive wife, urged him to take part, she said, "This is your moment." A very common and strong phrase used to encourage someone to take a big chance. Leo's honest reply, "My tongue feels like sandpaper, and my knees knock together," is a wonderfully clear, almost funny, way to describe the physical signs of being extremely nervous. And Maria's practical advice, "Talk to me," to the mirror, even to the cat, humorously shows that any kind of steady practice, no matter how small or seemingly unimportant, is helpful. The description of his first practice sessions is also very detailed. It was agonizing, meaning it was very hard and painful. He would stumble over words, meaning he spoke awkwardly and made mistakes. He would forget transitions, meaning he struggled to move smoothly between ideas. And he would blush furiously at his own reflection, showing strong self-consciousness and embarrassment. But then, the beautiful change begins. A subtle change began to happen. His voice started to gain strength. His words started to flow more naturally, and his fear seemed to shrink. These phrases, gently and realistically, show his slow but important progress. Finally, at the showcase itself, his heart was thumping like a drum, a powerful way to say he was very nervous. But then, surprisingly, something clicked. This phrase, "something clicked," is a great and very natural expression, meaning that something suddenly made sense, fell into place, or became clear. And the fact that the applause was deafening and people flocked to his table clearly shows his great success and the good welcome he received. The deep conclusion that his consistent effort built up not just his speaking skills, but his confidence, is the main universal message applying not only to overcoming public speaking fears, but to all parts of learning a language. It serves as a strong reminder that steady effort, even if it seems small, can indeed lead to big and truly life-changing personal growth. So, as you continue your very valuable journey with English listening, please remember these very important points. Make it a daily habit, but do not feel forced to do too much. Even 15 to 20 minutes of genuinely focused listening can be very effective and give good results. Always choose things to listen to that you are truly interested in. If you are interested, you will naturally want to understand and keep going. Practice using the 3-step method. First, listen for the main idea, then for details, and finally for connection and thinking about it. Actively use helpful tools like written texts and the shadowing method as these can greatly speed up your progress in conversational English. Welcome variety in what you listen to. Listen to different accents, different speeds of talking, and different types of content to build strong listening skills. Focus closely on real-life stories and real ways of speaking, as this approach truly brings the language to life and helps you understand its small differences and how it is used in everyday talks, or ours. And most importantly, be patient and keep trying. Remember that learning a language is a long journey, not a quick race. Celebrate every small win along the way, and do not let yourself get discouraged by problems or temporary setbacks. Your brain, I promise you, is a very flexible and powerful part of you. And with steady listening and active involvement, you will naturally start to notice patterns, guess meanings, and understand more and more of what you hear. It is much like building a muscle. The more you work it, the stronger and more capable it becomes. And before you know it, you will find yourself easily laughing at jokes in English, confidently following complex conversations, and feeling truly connected to the lively and wide world of English speakers. Thank you so very much for joining me today on Best English Podcast. I sincerely hope this episode has given you not just useful information, but also real inspiration and practical, clear ways to make daily English listening a fun, engaging, and truly life-changing part of your language learning journey. Keep listening, keep learning, and always remember, every single minute you dedicate to immersing yourself in English is a big step closer to speaking easily in conversation. Until next time, happy listening.